filmmakers of all time. Not even just in the horror genre, but particularly in the horror genre. He's one of my favorites of all time. It's pretty much him and Mike Flanagan, who are pretty much my number 1 and 2 when it comes to filmmakers in the genre. Obviously, Wes Craven's give us The Hills Have Eyes, People Under the Stairs, Nightmare on Elm Street, Scream, so it's pretty good lineage under his belt and his track record. Yeah, for me, Scream is one of the earliest memories I have of watching a horror movie. I remember being a kid and being in my living room and just bits and pieces of the original, but one in particular, I remember the kitchen scene in the finale. I just kind of remember being a kid and watching that and being like, oh my god, this is so crazy. Yeah, Ghostface never really scared me. I don't really think he scares anybody. It's more of like a suspenseful thriller slasher opposed to like a nefarious character. So yeah. Disclaimer before we go any further, if you haven't seen any of these movies, I'm kind of going to be spoiling the killers of all the movies and stuff like that, so yeah, without further ado, let's go. I'm going to start from the bottom up today, so the worst to the best, even though they're all pretty good in my opinion. So in 5th place for me, it's going to be Scream 3. Now listen, if Scream 3 is the worst installment in your franchise, you're doing pretty good in the horror realm. Notoriously, horror movies have a crazy track record of having a bunch of outlandish, just horrible, like incoherent, ridiculous nonsensical sequels. Yeah, Freddy's Final Nightmare, I'm looking at you. Jason Takes Manhattan, I'm looking at you. But no, it's if that's the worst you have to offer, I can't complain. My problem with Scream 3 is it's not even the issue with the film itself, it's the issue with the subject and the external circumstances that cause it to be such a cluster of a movie. There was a lot of script leaks, so there was a lot of rewrites and, script changes, major ones, and killers were dropped and whatnot. I mean, at one point Angelina was supposed to be the second killer with Roman. But, and if you watch the movie, you can see some instances where it's physically impossible that Roman was the sole killer, and that's my biggest issue, the continuity aspect of the aspect of it just physically couldn't have been one killer. So, it takes me out of it for that type of thing, especially when it's a movie where it's so reliant upon the who is it mystery of it, If it was an intentional decision to only have one killer right off the bat, then I would be so for it because they would have planned it out accordingly. The issue is that wasn't how they did it. So, yeah, also the reveal of Roman being the killer, being Sydney's brother, kind of like bastard brother because of the whole, I'm not going to say the word because it's a pretty bad word to throw out there and, algorithm wise and whatnot probably, but there was an assault on Maureen, who was Sydney's mother, and their outcome was a child who ends up becoming a filmmaker and is, basically just out for vengeance against Sydney. One of the things I don't like that it did, it kind of retconned the original Scream by saying that Roman was the reason that Billy and Stu got incentivized to do the killings, and all that. And I don't like that personally, but yeah, it is what it is. Carrie Fisher makes a cameo, which is pretty funny. That's good. It's cool in the aspect that it's really Gale and Dewey's story for a lot of it. It's not really Sydney as the main character, which is understandable because Neve Campbell was like under strict circumstances. I think she was had pre-existing requirements or obligations for another film or series that she was working on, so she was limited to 20 days of filming or something crazy like that. So just to add to the cluster of stir-pot of nonsense in that movie. Yeah, so Scream 3 is my least favorite, but again, if that's the worst you got to offer, then not too bad. And freaking fan of. Like, freaking fan. Like, I love them all. Scream 3, I like it a lot, but I don't love it. Scream 4, right off the bat, with the misdirection of the opening kill. You know, it has the opening kill, but then it's a gag for stab 6. And then, you know, it has characters in real time discussing the effects in the aftermath of what they just saw within the movie, inside of the movie, inside the movie. And it's like, oh, this is so crazy. And then, you know, you think that the misdirect is over, but then it turns out the girl stabs her friend twice in the stomach, and it's like, oh my god, that was part of stab 7. So now you get like another, if anyone's listening to this who's never seen this movie, they're probably like, what on God's earth are you talking about? Basically, the opening to Scream 4 is 2 misdirects. So there's a kill scene in the beginning that's not real, it's inside of a movie. Zooms out, and then there's a kill that's not real, it's inside of a movie. And zooms out, and then it's the real world. Then Ghostface comes and kills the people for real. And that's the legitimate opening of the movie. Just saying that out loud, it sounded confusing to myself. I think it didn't age too great, just based on the fact of, if you've seen the movie before, you know, you kind of know what you're expecting, it kind of loses the pizzazz. Sometimes I still get a chuckle from it, but most of the time it's like, okay, whatever. I mean, first time viewing, that's a crazy thing to see, though. It's pretty cool that they did that. So that's kind of a pro and a con. And my really only other big con with the movie, if I had to be honest, I have 2. One's a small, one's a big one. The big one is just a cash grab. I mean, it's made over a decade later. It comes out when, you know, there's a Texas Chainsaw reboot and Halloween and all that. It's strictly studio meddling, kind of forcing a project out there. Not the biggest fan of that aspect, but it is what it is. And then another downfall of the movie, they overdo it with the whodunit mystery. They try to make everybody seem like they're suspicious, sometimes to the extent where it doesn't work. What's her name? Officer Judy. That conversation she has with Cindy at one point where she's like, oh, we went to high school together, you never saw me, or whatever. It's like, okay, you've never shown signs of being that weird before, that stalkerish and creepy, so it's like, why start now? You know, it's a little bizarre to me. And then the other one is Jill's mom comes home one night after grocery shopping, but it's like, it's the middle of the night, it's like 9-10 p.m. I don't know, it's a little weird. Just, you're gonna grocery shop during the midst of all that, of what's going on, of all the killings and Ghostface being back. It's pretty freaking bizarre to me. One of my favorite kills in the whole franchise in this movie. I think his name's Officer Perkins. I can see the guy in my head. I can't think of his. I think it's Officer Perkins. He gets a Ghostface knife right to the forehead, and oh my goodness, he goes right in. Just like, there's a knife in this guy's forehead. He takes it out, and there's blood everywhere, and he's kind of standing and walking and bobbling around, just like, oh my god, how is this guy standing right now? You know, it's like more of a shock factor, but crazy kill. I mean, they had to get kind of original sometimes with the kills, because majority of the kills are just with a hunting knife, so you're kind of limited on options. It's not like, you know, the Ghostface doesn't typically use it, their environments at their advantage type of thing. Yeah, another thing was Scream 4 is cool. I like how they took the approach of Cindy being a full author. You know, she comes back to Woodsboro to kind of do a book related thing, which is cool. It's not forced. It's pretty good. I thought that was pretty valid. Kirby's a hell of a character. Hayden Panettiere did a very, very good job as that character. It's one of my favorite, probably next to Stu, Matthew Lillard's character. Yeah, I mean, a lot of good things to say about that movie. Very violent fight between Jill at the end, where her and Cindy both almost die and end up in the hospital. And then I like the little nod to the hospital. Obviously, Scream's pretty meta, so I kind of saw that as kind of a homage to Halloween 2 in a sense. And they have when Gail realizes like Jill's the killer, and you know, the rest of the hospital, it's like, oh Jesus. favorite for sure. I think they're utilized fairly well. What else is there? Yeah, the reveal of Jill being the killer. Crazy, crazy reveal. Very well done. Really out of the blue. Did not see that coming. I was actually pretty shocked. I think I was like 13 when I watched the movie, or 14. It came out like 2011, but I remember watching it. I was like 13 or 14. I was like, oh Jesus, that's the killer. Charlie being the other killer, he's probably the most anticlimactic killer in the whole franchise. I care the least about him than anybody. Yeah. So yeah, number 4 is Scream 4. Number 3 is gonna be Scream 2022. Not the original Scream. Don't worry, guys. Scream 2022 will be number 3. It's the first Scream I saw in the movie theaters. I saw it with my brother. I think I actually did a post watch review of it for the channel, if I'm not mistaken. So that's pretty sick. Yeah, I've probably watched it 3 times since it came out. So 3 times in like 6 months ish, 7 months since it came out. Maybe. So yeah, I've seen it enough to kind of formulate an opinion, I think. Yeah, I think it's right there in the middle. It's nothing crazy for me. I called out both killers fairly quick. I called out Richie as the killer extremely quick, and I called out Amber as the killer as soon as Sam and Tara were talking in the hospital, and Amber said something about Tara having her inhaler. I was like, oh, well that chick's the killer, no question in my mind. I leaned over my brother and said it both times, and he was like, the second time I said it over the killer, he's like, dude, stop. I was like, alright, fine. In hindsight, I wish I never said that, because it probably, would have been, he's a younger guy, so it would have been more of a shock if he didn't really think about it. So that one's on me, but yeah, I'd put Scream right in the middle. It's nothing crazy. I think Radio Silence did a pretty good job with it. It's pretty brutal. It's probably the most brutal. That's probably my favorite takeaway of the movie. The story's whatever. I'm not really engaged with the characters all that much, especially like Liv. Didn't care when she died. I have no feelings to Sam. I don't care about her as a character. I'm not a fan of her portrayal at all. I think it's awful. Not the actress, but I just like the character. I don't like how they brought back Billy. What's the Skeet Aldridge? I don't like how they brought him back as a premonition. That's another thing I forgot to mention. Ravens of Scream 3. I don't like how they brought in Marine as like a ghost. It's very weird. I don't like that. One of the things I like about Scream, aside from the meta-ness, is the fact that it's based in reality. It's based in the fact that these are just random people. There's nothing crazy about this. So when they start doing that kind of stuff, I'm not too big of a fan. But obviously it could have been mental illness related, because Sam's seen taking medications progressively throughout the movie to kind of combat those types of ideas. I understand it. Yeah, there's nothing really stands out. It's a pretty solid movie. I think it's a better story than Scream 3. Not a better story than Scream 4, but it has better kills. Wes's kill when he's getting, the knife to the side of his neck, it's brutal because he's fighting it off and it's being pushed back and forth. So I felt that. Judy gets absolutely laid out. That whole build up. Oh my goodness. When Wes is inside of that house after Judy's dead, and we know that she's dead. And even the phone call from Ghostface to Judy is so heartbreaking. He's like, your little boy will be dead, or whatever he says, and I'm like, oh my Jesus, that's so terrifying. And to imagine a mother hearing that, it's like, oh goodness. But yeah, it's so good. And then the build up when he's getting out of the shower, every time he opens a door, or was it anything, you just expect to see Ghostface there, and he's never there. But then when you least suspect it, boom, there he is. It's like, holy shit. It really catches you off guard. Dewey's death was crazy brutal. Physically, it doesn't make sense, because Amber is a teenage girl. She's not lifting David Arquette in the air like that, but whatever. Also, the coincidental factor of, her wearing a bulletproof vest, which is not that crazy, but, he shoots, and he never was made to be this like Rambo type of guy in this movie, but he doesn't do the one thing he's supposed to do, and then he knows what he's supposed to do. It's whatever. I'm a big fan of Chad and Mindy. I think that's what her name is. His sister. Good characters. Mindy in particular. Chad's okay. Nothing crazy. Oh, I think the scene where Chad is Ghostface like runs out of the shed and chases Chad, and he's kind of stumbling. I don't know how he survived. Kind of unpractical. Not a big fan of that, but it is what it is. I understand you need surviving characters to build a legacy upon, but yeah, it's whatever. Yeah, let's see. Cool final scene. Pretty good reveal. Where Richie reveals himself to be the killer. You know, Amber's was pretty anticlimactic. It was very bizarre, actually. It kind of reminded me of a Truth or Dare type of thing. And I say that because ways that the movie where the faces would kind of morph. Yeah, it reminded me of Truth or Dare when the faces would kind of do that. The camera would kind of turn all awkwardly. That's how that camera looked. It didn't look like it belonged in a Scream movie, but it was interesting. Didn't like that reveal, but when she popped the lid, I was like, oh Jesus, it's on now, but it was a little weird. The meta was cranked up to a pretty high extent. It was pretty sick. That was pretty well executed. Considering it was the only one without Wes at the helm, I think it was executed fairly well and paid good enough homage to him. So yeah, that's right in the middle for me. And my number 2 spot is going to be Scream 2. Yeah, I think it's the best of the sequels. Simply due to the fact that it has one of the best killer reveals. In my mind, probably the second or third best character reveal for killers. When it comes to Miss Loomis. Obviously a huge shout out to Pamela Voorhees from Friday the 13th. I think Mickey is a very scary killer simply due to the fact that he's just a psychopath. I mean, there's no real motive for him aside from the fact that he's simply just mentally unstable and is a murderer. You know, it's pretty scary and pretty eerie. And you know, you look back at any of these movies, the killers always interact pretty well with the main cast, but Mickey's is kind of different because he's sitting in class with them. He's having a dialogue. You know, he's sitting with Sydney and her boyfriend. I can't think of his name. What's his name? I can see his face. Whatever. He's no Mark Kincaid, you know. But no, he's sitting at that table with them at lunch, and he's cracking jokes and he's clapping. I think he actually starts like the chant clap thing in the middle of lunch. It's like, oh man, this guy's sadistic. Pretty good opening. I love the opening. I love the whole thing. How the theme is based around they're killing people, based around the original victims of Woodsboro Massacre. That's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. I thought it's really good intro when what's her name? Well, Jada Pinkett is, you know, getting attacked by Ghostface, and she walks up on stage. Everyone thinks it's a joke and all that shit. It's crazy. Oh man, I wish I ever saw a movie theater get that hyped over a movie before. I mean, oh my god, the people in that movie theater are so happy to be there. Yeah, it's pretty good in that regard. I like Sydney's character the whole time. You know, she's progressed since the first one. She's come to terms with what happened. I mean, even when it gets to the point where, you know, some people are calling her phone and all that, and, you know, she's like, they're messing with her, but she's even like, oh, I'm prepared. You know, I got like an ID tracer. Like, I know who's calling me with her phone. You know, it's like, that's dope. That's dope. You know, as a fan of cinema, definitely not to the extent of some of these guys were in the movie, but you know, the cinema scene where they're sitting around during class at the college, and they're talking about sequels, and you know, they start mentioning, you know, Aliens and Terminator and Empire and Godfather. It's like, oh yeah, man, sequels get so much shit, and they knew it. They were so self-aware to the fact that this was automatically going to get casted upon as bullshit. movie. A lot of people don't like that. I freaking love it. It shows that nobody is safe. You know, it shows that nobody's making out of that. You know what I mean? Yeah, man, it's a good flick. It's a good flick. There's obviously things I can nitpick about it. One of the major ones is when, you know, Ghostface is passed out behind the car and Cindy climbs over and, like, halfway she's like, oh, I'm gonna take off the mask, and it's like, bro, just get out of the car and take off the mask. You know, it's like, it's just sloppy writing. You know, whatever it is, it's simply an excuse for her friend to get killed, and it's whatever. But yeah, pretty solid sequel. And of course, number one, I mean, I feel like everybody would have known this going in, is the 1996 Scream. Let me tell you one thing right now. When I saw that movie as a kid, I wanted to be Randy. I wanted to work in a DVD store. I wanted to know everything about all movies ever. I wanted to be the guy at parties who sat around just watching movies, talking about, like, I know it's so crazy and so weird, but, like, I always wanted to, like, in the back of my head, be that guy in a sense. Like, oh, I nerded out over it. I mean, what is there to say about the movie that reshaped the genre? You know, that single-handedly brought back the slasher genre in the 90s and is the reason for an ungodly amount of offshoots. I mean, I would argue that, you know, it goes, there's a few movies that are as monumental in the history of horror as Scream. Let's stick to slashers, though, for a second. I mean, you got The Psycho, obviously. Maybe Black Christmas, but that didn't really catch on till later, so maybe not. Definitely Halloween and Scream. I think it's those three, sometimes maybe four. I mean, that really solidified and gave bearings to the idea of a good slasher movie. I think it just inspires so many, you know, offshoots of it. The meta-ness of that movie that carried on throughout the whole trilogy, the whole saga, of course, it's so well executed in this movie. I mean, they're so self-aware that they could be in a movie. You know, it makes you think that, man, I could be with this group of people. Like, this could be me. I could be one of these people that go to this school and know these people. I could have known Casey Becker. Like, I could have done these things. Speaking of Casey Becker, their whole marketing campaign was all based around Drew Barrymore, and then they murder her in the opening scene. God, the balls on those guys. It's so good. So good. I've heard that Drew Barrymore actually proposed the idea to be Casey. I think she was actually going out for the role of Sydney, but then she had the idea that she'd be like, it would be more impactful if she died right off the rip, you know, as Casey, because, you know, the bigger star. I guess Wes Craven just loved it, and if that's the true story, man, that's amazing. But yeah, man, it's so good. The most iconic thing ever, basically. It's, you know, what's your favorite scary movie? It's like, hello, CC Anthony, hello, Casey. You know, it's like, sorry about that, the whispering got me yawning. Yeah, it's just so iconic. The reveal of Billy as one of the killers, man, because it's obviously he's the red herring the whole entire time, but there's so many contradictory events that deter you from sticking with the notion that he's the killer. It's so well methodically placed, man. I mean, you're built to believe that it's Billy is the killer the whole entire time, and then he goes to jail, and then she gets a phone call, and you're like, oh, okay. But then you really wholeheartedly have zero doubt in your mind after they're having intercourse and they're done, and Ghostface comes in and stabs Billy. It's like, holy shit, Billy really wasn't the killer. Like, what? And it's just, obviously he turns out to be the killer, but the whole misdirection and constantly making you guess, it's just, oh, it's so good. It's what Halloween, it's what Scream 4 did wrong with the misdirections, you know? It's like they try to imitate what they did with Scream and just couldn't do it effectively. to begin with, personally. I mean, from 13 Ghosts to Scooby-Doo, like, I'm actually a legitimate fan of Matthew Lillard. I think the reveal of him as the killer is such a good out of the blue thing. You know, they keep his motive pretty tame. You know, like he said, peer pressure was his motive. You know, obviously you can speculate what his real motive was or whatnot, but it's cool. They kind of left it some ambiguity. I can't say the word. Some ambiguity pertaining to his whole motive and, you know, rationale behind it all. Billy's is more cutthroat. He sees Cindy and her father as part of the basically the whole family is the reason that his mom left him. You know, it's very sad in a way. But you know, you feel for him, but then you see the extent that he's willing to go to follow his insanity and his notions of delusional grandeur, and it's like, okay, my sympathy for this psychopath's gone real quick. It's so good though. It's so good. And then, you know, at the end when the true final girls really showed, it's just, you know, Gail coming to the rescue and, you know, like grabbing the gun. It doesn't feel forced, you know. It doesn't feel forced. Sometimes like final girl acts can feel forced, especially in like Friday the 13th, for instance. It kind of feels pretty forced at times. This feels pretty natural, to be honest with you. It feels like Cindy's legitimate, like just a badass, you know. It feels like Gail's a little different, but whatever. Don't get me started on Dewey. Okay, I just had a loud bang, sorry about that. Don't even get me started on Dewey's character. It's a ridiculous character. I'm not a fan of the portrayal. It's pretty comical. But it's, you know, it is what it is. David Arquette was pretty goofy, and I think he was supposed to actually die in the original, which is pretty funny, but I'm happy he didn't because he had a pretty good character development. And probably my favorite part of the whole movie is when Jamie Kennedy, aka Randy Meeks, is sitting on the couch, and they're watching, and all the students have left and all that, and I know I'm missing a lot. I'm not doing a summary of the movie or like a review. I'm just kind of brief explanation, so anyone, you know, wonder why I'm jumping around. I could definitely do reviews of individual movies in the future, but for now, this is just brief synopsises. But, you know, he's sitting on the couch and all the students have gone. He's watching Halloween and he's talking to Jamie Lee Curtis's character. But he's not calling her Lori, he's calling her Jamie based on her actual name, because inside of Scream, Halloween is simply just a movie. Even though in Halloween H2O they're watching Scream 2, it's continuity's a little weird, but I mean, you know, he's just sitting there and he's telling Jamie Lee Curtis to turn around. He's like, behind you, Jamie, behind you. And the whole time Ghostface is creeping up behind him, whose real name is also Jamie. It's one of the most brilliantly executed things I've ever witnessed in my whole entire life. I mean, absolutely brilliant in every single fraction of the regard. You know, it's just Scream 5 did something cool with that too, where they kind of made where they had Mindy watching her uncle Randy's interpretation instead of a stab movie of doing the same scene. But it was a little weird because it was like inside of it. I tried a little too much, but this was just so good, man. You know, it's a character talking to himself. You can't get more meta than a character calling himself by his first name and watching a character inside of a movie with the same first name, with the same scenario. I mean, it's the epitome of meta, and it's amazing. So for that reason and many more, the original Scream is my favorite of the franchise and also one of my favorite of all time. So yeah, thank you all for watching. I hope you found The Whispers a little relaxing. If you didn't watch this for sleep, I know I don't really watch ASMR all the time for sleep. Sometimes I just throw it on in the background and kind of listen to people ramble. So whatever you did this for, I hope you enjoyed it.